I'm Brandi. Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, a federal court has ruled that schools who protect girls' sports are in turn protected from federal retribution. Plus, Republican Senator Braun joins us to explain why he would support making the public schools chief an appointed position rather than an elected one. And we'll revisit Washington's domestic violent extremism task force, which has its next meeting tomorrow. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. I'm Brandi Kruse. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to give. I'm laughing because Nicole was just giving me a pep talk. We were rushed to the show today. We had to tape 100 interviews. And Nicole's like, you got this. Great topics today. It's going to be great. I'm like her child participating in sports, which will bring us into our first segment of the show. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate that. She was very saw me panicking. But it's okay. We panic behind the scenes. Then we come on and we deliver a flawless show, hopefully. Another win for girls' sports. I really think that the extreme gender ideology agenda is crumbling before our very eyes. And once those balls get rolling, I mean, absolutely, they're going to pick up momentum. I shouldn't use the word balls. I'm talking about the gender identity issue because I'm a child. They're going to pick up momentum, and then this issue is going to be done. And I'm very hopeful for that day. I'm hopeful for everyone who was on the right side all along to be able to say, see, another example of, sanity, of us being sane and being told we were hateful, awful bigots, and now we're on the right side of this issue, which, by the way, I wasn't on the right side of this issue all along. Girls' sports, I might have been. I don't know if I ever supported males participating against girls, but on some of the transgender issues, the extreme gender ideology, Lord knows that I was misguided a few years back. But so here's what happened today. I saw Riley Gaines push this out, calling it a huge win for girls and women everywhere. So this is from the Alliance Defending Freedom. Victory for women and girls as a federal court rejects the Biden administration's redefinition of sex in Title IX across the country. And really if you're not familiar with this, what the Biden rule did, so Title IX was meant to protect women in sports and fairness. And the Biden administration and Biden in what he calls the final rule reinterpreted Title IX to also say your gender identity is protected. So that is what states like ours have used to justify putting girls in these really unfair positions where they have to compete against biological boys. And so you have all these blue states that have been doing that. And then for states that aren't abiding by Biden's interpretation of Title IX, well, they're at risk, of losing federal funding for education. And so there are punishments for that. If you're a state that says, no, we're not going to let dudes participate against chicks, well, you could be putting at risk millions or billions of dollars by taking that stand. Well, not anymore. This from the United States District Court in the Eastern District of Kentucky. So this was the state of Tennessee versus Miguel Cardona in his official capacity as the Secretary of Education. And they have ruled in favor of the state of Tennessee, essentially saying what is true, that Biden's interpretation of Title IX is ridiculous. And it totally undercuts the meaning of Title IX in the first place. It says, expanding the meaning of on the basis of sex to include gender identity turns Title IX on its head. While Title IX sought to level the playing field between men and women, it is rife with exceptions that allow males and females to be separated based on the enduring physical differences between the sexes. The ruling goes on to state, the entire point of Title IX is to prevent discrimination based on sex. Throwing gender identity into the mix eviscerates the statute and renders it largely meaningless. The court remains persuaded that the final rule, Biden's final rule, is arbitrary and capricious. Schools need not comply with the rule to receive federal funding. So there have been slowly, I think, really positive court rulings in this direction. And we absolutely know that the Supreme Court, based on, Trump's appointees and the way that it's stacked right now, is also on the side of sanity on this issue. Now, this doesn't say that a state like Washington must stop abiding by Biden's rule, final rule. It doesn't say that Washington state is going to be punished at this juncture, at least, for continuing to allow boys to compete against biological boys or girls. There's still very much a fight going on here. But for states, if there's any states who they would go this path, if not for the prospect of losing federal funds, this takes that concern away from them, where they can do the right thing without being concerned about the financial or fiscal consequences for their schools. So make no mistake, I mean, this is great news. It's one thing at a time, right, in the march towards sanity. But there's still a fight happening in Washington state that is going to be sort of on its own that we also need to deal with. So just a reminder, there's actually a few meetings we're going to remind you about on the show today if you want to get actively involved in this. So the WIAA, which is the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, which is the governing body for public school sports in our state, they are considering two different amendments, Amendment 7 and Amendment 8, to their rules, which would protect girls' sports. So right now in Washington, we already know, because at the state level, there have been biological boys smoking in the high school level and the junior high level, smoking girls in competition, like in track, for instance. So those are the rules right now, but the WIAA is at least considering these two amendments. One of them would say basically girls' sports are protected, and if you're gender diverse, you either have to participate in the sport that aligns with your gender or you have to participate with the boys. Or the Second Amendment would make a separate category for like gender diverse athletes, which I don't see how that would work because you're not going to be able to build a basketball team with gender diverse athletes. So just a reminder, as we see this momentum. So the key when you get no momentum is not to let up. So today, if you haven't done so already, email the WIAA, Mick Hoffman at the WIAA. Please be respectful. mhoffman@WIAA.com, and share your support for Amendment 7, Amendment 8. Both of the amendments, either of them would be better than the status quo. Either of them would be better than the situation we're in right now, where biological girls are losing to biological boys and having to compete against them. So the fight absolutely continues nationally for this to be. I believe that the only sane outcome is for, now look, I'm in support of states' rights, right? This gets into this tricky area of, do you let the states decide what they want to do individually? You know, I think that's a good place for abortion to have landed, because if it's really a sticking point to you, the whole state is not or the whole nation is not a monolith. You can go to a state if that's how you want to choose the state you live in based on abortion access, like by all means. And so you could look at that here and say, is it hypocritical to then want the federal government to dictate what local school districts and states and public school systems can do when it comes to girls' sports? I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I certainly don't want schools to be punished and to have money withheld from them for making the common sense decision that boys can't compete against girls. And this also gets into, by the way, Title IX. It's not just about competition on the field or on the court. The final rule from Biden also is being interpreted to say that transgender individuals have a right of access to locker rooms and to bathrooms as well. And that is a totally separate controversial issue entirely, where it's like, okay, even if your daughter isn't participating in sports, they're using the bathroom at school. They're probably using the locker room at school. So you have a lot of parents who are concerned about that. So change takes time. I see change on the horizon. We have to continue fighting for girls and for women, frankly. And so make sure you send that email to the WIAA. I think it's the end of this month. Is it like the 24th or something of January, where they're going to have another meeting of the WIAA? So the sooner you send that email, the better. All right. I want to follow up on a story that had that was quite the discussion because Nicole disagreed with me. How dare she yesterday? So there was this story in the Washington State Standard. Ferguson and GOP leaders see value in eliminating Washington's elected schools chief. So the idea being, I mean, Bob Ferguson campaigned on this, right? Bob Ferguson campaigned on eliminating the elected position of OSPI, which you just voted on and gave Chris Rakedahl a third term, and replacing it with a cabinet position that's under him that would be an appointee of the governor, because he feels like it would make the public school chief more accountable, which I just think is a really bad idea. I don't think, similar to when King County voters voted away their right to vote for sheriff, I don't see how giving a politician control over someone is making them more accountable than giving voters control over someone. So Bob Ferguson campaigned on wanting to do this. He couldn't do it on an island. It would take a constitutional amendment, 2/3 support in the House and the Senate. But then the real surprise was that there were some Republicans who say, yeah, I support that as well. One of those Republicans is the Senate minority leader, so the head of the Republicans in the Senate, John Braun, who was quoted in this State Standard story saying he thinks that that would be a good idea. Now, whether this is actually going to be something that's introduced this session, I'm not so sure. Democratic leadership doesn't seem eager to tackle this. And again, the whole ordeal of a constitutional amendment, they've got a whole budget situation to figure out. But it's still a fascinating debate. Now, I polled subscribers on this issue yesterday. I asked you, should the head of the state's public school system be elected or appointed? And the results were overwhelming. 98% of you across our three subscription platforms said it should be elected. And for that reason, that you want them to be accountable to you, not accountable to a politician like Bob Ferguson, who will probably be the governor for 4 terms. Lord only knows. So Senator John Braun got in touch with us and he said, hey, you should have me come on your show and explain my position on this. And so today we allowed him the platform to do just that. Senator Braun, welcome back to Undivided.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you ready for the session? What are your expectations?
Well, you never quite feel, at least I never feel fully ready, but I think we're pretty well prepared. I mean, I think it's going to be a challenging session, lots of important things to deal with, not surprising. The biggest issue is the budget. I think that's going to be the big fight. And right now, the Democratic majority is certainly signaling that they think the answer is taxes. I think they're 100% wrong. So that's going to be, I think, quite a debate. And hopefully, I think we have the better argument. So we'll see where we get. Where we land.
Can you promise me right now that not a single member of your caucus will vote for a new tax increase?
I'm very cautious about speaking for my colleagues in the caucus, but I think I can safely say that none of them will support a tax increase.
All right, let's hope so. Okay, so you and I go into the session with a little disagreement. Let's hash it out, shall we? I said I'd have you on to make your case. So this isn't a bill right now or a proposal, and it sounds like the Democratic leadership isn't really eager to prioritize it either, but I think it's an interesting conversation. So you support Bob Ferguson's wishes, essentially, to have the head of our public school system be folded into his cabinet. Make your best case, sir.
Well, I mean, just broadly, let's be clear, Governor-elect Ferguson ran as a moderate Republican. If you look at his talking points from this one to all the other ones, he adopted Republican talking points for the last 3 or 4 years. So why would we not want to hold him accountable for those? He promised to do certain things. This is among them. So I'm supporting him. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think he really wants to do this. He just wants to get credit for being a change agent. So he'll say, yeah, I want to fix K-12. I would change the OSPI so it reports directly to me and I'd make it better. But he knows that the Washington Education Association is going to put their thumb on this. It's never going to happen. And he gets credit for both, right? That's where he's at. So I'm just saying, no, let's do this. Let's seriously do this, because the reality is the superintendent of public education is little known to most people, including parents who have their kids in education, and yet he exerts enormous influence on the effectiveness of that program. It is clearly failing. I don't think we disagree on that, hopefully. Half of our students, more than half of our students, aren't reading or at math level, grade level for math. Having trouble speaking.
Did you go to our state's public school system, Senator?
Yeah, I am a public school graduate. We're by any measure, we're failing. 10 years ago, we were a top 10 in the country, and now we're below half, and we're falling back. And here's the worst part of it. The tops, people say, well, Mississippi's doing better than Washington right now, which is true. But it's not because their top students are doing better than our top students. All of our top students are doing just fine. They're going to do well, and good for them. The students in the middle, the students that are struggling, whether it's financial or academic or social, emotional, when you're talking about the achievement gap, that's where we're failing. The kids that the Democratic majority say they really care about, they're 100% leaving those kids behind. I do care about them, and I think the best way to do that is to make the person that voters are paying the most attention to accountable for this. And I get that's a hard thing to do, that it could get spread broadly with many responsibilities of the executive. Let's be clear, nearly half of our budget, it should be over half of our budget, goes towards K-12 public education, over $30 billion. And yet most people in our state don't have any idea who the superintendent of public instruction is. That shouldn't be the case.
Yeah,
They should at least know who's in charge.
I think my predominant issue, same reason with the King County Sheriff, is this idea that somehow a government official would be more accountable if they were accountable to a politician rather than the voters. I mean, doesn't it give voters less accountability for who's in charge of their public school system?
I think 90% of the time I would agree with you, Brandi. I agree with you on the sheriff position. I think 100% those should be elected positions. But that's because they get a lot of attention in that election. It's a very front and center election that voters are really paying attention to. The reality is, sadly, that nobody's paying attention to the superintendent of public instruction race. And even when they do, the Washington Education Association rolls in with $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it takes to buy that election, and they scoop it up. So nobody really has a real voice. I mean, if you look at these other, besides the governor certainly, and maybe I'd say the attorney general, very few of our statewide races get a lot of attention. They certainly don't raise a lot of money, and therefore, unless you have a particular interest in it, you're not, it doesn't resonate with voters. There's no, so I'm with you philosophically that, the best accountability is directly to the voters. I just think in this case, it's not working. And as they say, if nothing changes, nothing changes. We got to try something different.
Yeah, wouldn't that be giving, because the superintendent of public instruction race is at least nonpartisan, where there's not a D or an R next to their name. So I find it way more likely, it's still not overwhelmingly likely though, that Republicans or someone who kind of dissents from this real woke political and social indoctrination agenda could be elected to that position. But the governor's office, you know as well as I do that in our lifetimes there will probably not be a Republican in the governor's office. So wouldn't this just be saying, we want Democrats to control the head of our public school system till for decades?
Well, a couple things I'd say. Yes, it's a nonpartisan position, but the reality is that the candidates have historically been well known as Republicans or Democrats. It's not a secret. And if somehow on the few cases where we've had, I think 2 cycles ago we had what I would call a real independent running for OSPI. It didn't matter. The WEA thought that the incumbent might lose, so they rolled up and called the independent a Republican, and they lost. So I don't think you're going to get politics out of this. But here's the thing: the ability, even Governor Inslee, who is indifferent to most of anything related to state government except for climate change. Even him in 2021, when we were fighting for months, 6-9 months, we were fighting to get kids back in school. In the spring of 2021, when the superintendent of public instruction was still holding the line on getting kids back in school, Governor Inslee came out and said we should get kids back in school. Republicans were able to put enough pressure, and parents, more importantly, were able to put enough pressure on Governor Inslee for him to publicly say kids should be back in school. I think that gives us political leverage to get results. Does it mean we're going to all of a sudden have a Republican governor? Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic than you are, but I do acknowledge it's going to be a tough go. So what do we do instead? We have to have leverage to affect change. We got to have parents and involved folks leverage to affect change. I think you do that better with the governor, because people will ignore if you say the superintendent of public instruction is screwing it up, which he is. People just won't resonate. People don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, though, I don't have a lot of faith in accountability through the means of the governor's office. I mean, look at Ross Hunter with DCYF. Look at the years of failure at DCYF, literally kids dying in the foster care system, everything happening at the juvenile detention facilities. And Inslee wouldn't fire him. He's letting him go off into the sunset. So Inslee absorbed an awful lot of pressure from even mainstream outlets like King 5 about Ross Hunter at DCYF, and he never felt so much pressure that he had to let him go.
I think you make a good point. And this may be hopeful on my thing, but I'm hopeful that Governor Ferguson is going to be different. As I said earlier, Governor Inslee is a one-track, pony, right?
Yeah.
He cares about climate change, climate efforts. For a short period of time, he cared about a pandemic, but then it was right back to climate. And everything else, whether it's labor and industries or revenue or DCYF or DSHS or any, name your agency, he was sort of indifferent. But we were able, and again, in a perfect world, I'd love to elect a nonpartisan superintendent of public instruction that was focused on kids and getting the best education to prepare them for their future lives. We don't have that right now. I don't see a future where we get that. So I want leverage, political leverage, to get change where we need change. I think we have a better chance if he reports to the governor.
Yeah, well, do me a favor. Let's wait to see which Bob Ferguson we're actually getting. Are we getting the Bob Ferguson he pretended to be on the campaign trail, or are we getting the Bob Ferguson he's been for 15 years? Because he'll be governor as long as he wants to be governor at this point. I truly believe that. So I want to see if he's going to keep his word on things, and if he's actually the change agent that he portends to be. Can I ask you about one more thing really quickly? I know you're rushing over to a legislative preview. Since we're talking about dissent, you mentioned something earlier about trying to make sure that we're helping the kids who are falling short. You know, their attendance is down in all of this. You have a bill, Senate Bill 5007, that, can you just summarize it quick? It seeks to help basically deal or help with kids who are chronically absent through what means?
Yeah, so this is, I think, a really important bill, and it's a problem we have had in Washington State for a long time. Chronically absent means kids are missing, 10% or more of the school days, and that doesn't matter whether they're excused or unexcused. It doesn't matter. If they're not in the classroom, they're falling behind. We have a real problem here. The bill is based on a pilot that was done in Educational Service District 112. Where they provided some additional resources to parents, to some local nonprofits, and to the school administration to basically track which kids are having trouble and check in with them and their parents and say, hey, how do we help you get in school? Is it a transportation issue? Is it a financial issue? Is it a nutritional issue? What's keeping you from being in class, and can we do something to help? And we should have no illusion. We're not going to solve every problem, but if we can close that gap, I mean, we've talked on and on about kids falling behind, particularly during the pandemic, and not catching up. We're not performing well. It's a foundational thing. They can't catch up. They can't keep up if they're not in the classroom. So this is simply a simple way to give parents, it allows for some nonprofit organizations to get involved, to help parents, help administrators reach out and say, hey, is there something we can do to help you attend class? And with the expectation, if they're in class, they're going to be more successful. The pilot was pretty successful. Again, we're not going to solve all the problems, but we have to get after this. And this is an area where Washington has been, sadly, a leader for many years. We exceed chronic absenteeism, by the way, is a national problem, but we're worse than most, and we need to do better. So this is a year where we're not going to have a lot of money to spend, but it's a small amount of money. I think we can have a disproportionate positive impact. Yeah,
and I asked you about that because it's interesting, this sort of like conservative disagreement on aspects of education. The conservative ladies of Washington criticized this bill. They said it's a blatant encroachment on parental rights. It allows school superintendents to assume they know best, often bypassing parents and handing students over to juvenile courts for truancy issues. They call the approach heavy-handed. What do you say?
So this very clearly isn't about truancy. It's not excused or unexcused. It's just absences. I think they're completely misunderstanding the bill. If you go look at what actually happened in the pilot, you'll see this was a cooperative approach. We were trying to help parents, help administrators find ways to get kids into the classroom. And this is not an attack on parents' rights. I think they're just flat out misunderstanding the nature of the bill and how it was actually done in a pilot program.
There's no aspect of it where the schools would be allowed to essentially assert their will over parents in terms of how their child's truancy issues are dealt with.
Yeah. Now, I think I want to be clear. There are some places where schools have some of those rights, and I agree with the conservative ladies of Washington in that area. But this bill does nothing to add to that situation to make it worse. They're right there. I have no interest in pursuing legislation that's going to further distance our parents from their children. That is wrong at every level. This bill doesn't do that.
All right, Senator John Braun, we'll let you get to your legislative preview. Weird, I wasn't invited this year.
Well, I'm inviting you. I know it's late, but you can certainly come as my guest if you'd like to.
I don't know if Inslee just didn't like my questions last year or what it was, but I wouldn't have been able to come anyway because of the timing. But Senator Braun, we appreciate it.
All right. You have a great day.
Yeah, not invited to the legislative preview. Interesting. That's all right. We're doing our live show anyway. Maybe they timed it so I couldn't come. I have no idea. We'll see if reporters are down there actually doing their jobs. We shall judge them from afar. All right. It's a new year. If you're thinking maybe it should be a new you or else just a slightly improved version of yourself, Schedule a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan and his team at Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. There's no pills, no injections, no strenuous workout routines. They just teach you what to eat in the right portions and then how to make some simple lifestyle changes to keep the weight off for life. I lost 40 pounds in the program, most of that in the first 30 days. My COVID weight gain after I left TV was gone like that, which was awesome. Not every program's right for every person, so you do need to start with that free 15-minute consultation. Just ask any questions that you have before you commit, because it is 60 days of really hard work, but as you can see, the results speak for themselves. So eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. Okay, domestic violent extremism meeting tomorrow. I want to talk about it. Another reminder. So first of all, we've discussed a lot about Washington's Domestic Violent Extremism Task Force, which is a brainchild of the new governor, Bob Ferguson, in tandem with the hate crime hotline. All they're trying to do is pretend, it's a lie about who is perpetrating domestic violent extremism in Washington. It's another way to vilify conservatives, Trump supporters, when we know that the groups who are perpetrating domestic violent extremism out in the open, not even hiding it, for years and years and years have been the far left, the Antifa type people. But oh no, we need a domestic violent extremism task force because, well, according to Biden, white supremacy is the biggest domestic terrorism threat that we have. And in here, they want to artificially inflate hate crimes because they want that to be used to justify more spending and to justify their narrative that, like, white people bad, right-wing dangerous, etc. So I ranted at length about the domestic violent extremism panel after its first meeting. Its second meeting is tomorrow, and I just want to note that you can attend if you would like to. I'm going to be attending. I don't know if I'm going to attend in person or via Zoom. I haven't figured it out yet. But a few details. So the meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. The agenda looks pretty basic. Oh, God. Domestic extremism and public health approaches in the United States, domestic extremism in Washington state. Then they'll hear from the public, and then they'll have task force discussion, and then they'll discuss next steps. If you want to be there for public testimony, 800 Fifth Avenue, Suite 2000, 800 Fifth Avenue, Suite 2000, 9 a.m. You do have to register, though, to testify. You can also testify via Zoom. So if you just go to the Washington State Extremism and Mass Violence Task Force website, you can find the Zoom link, the password, more information on the meeting, and then also how to register your name to be able to be part of public testimony. We need some sane people to do that. We need some sane people to do that because we know that the task force is packed with insane people who genuinely believe that the only threat of domestic extremism in Washington is coming from the far right. I want to play it again in case you missed it the first time because I really need you to understand the importance of getting involved in this task force so it doesn't become what we kind of know it is on its way to becoming. Here is a montage of the task force members from the first meeting.
Good morning. My name is Katrina Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of Black Lives Matter, Seattle King County. We are a statewide agency. My pronouns are she, her. I'm here looking for innovative ways and tangible ways to protect our community when law enforcement isn't the go-to people.
My name is Amasai Cheke. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with Utopia Washington, a queer and trans Pacific Islander-led organization. Yes, I'm excited to be here and also to learn in ways to strengthen social justice movement. Thank you.
I'm Leslie Cushman. I'm here on behalf of the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability. I use she, her pronouns. We're worried about the mainstreaming of extremism. We're worried about law enforcement affiliation with extremism and how this impacts community safety and well-being, and how it impacts the rule of law.
Good morning, everyone. Luis Moscoso. I'm a former state representative on the Public Safety Committee 11 years ago, where I first tried to bring up this issue of looking into militia movements and other activities. I have had direct experience with militia people going back over 30 years in Snohomish County, where I used to live.
Hi, my name's Mary Hall. I'm the Thurston County Auditor. I look forward to serving on this committee. I think we really need to take a deep dive into how we protect our communities in this incoming administration, and not only the community, but election workers. I think there's a lot of underlying tension.
My name is Juan Perales. I'm president of Unidos of Snohomish County. who has been addressing for the last 3-4 years now, domestic terrorism and police accountability. And now that we have Trump in power, this issue has become even more important. So I think it's going to take collective action on the part of us to address the oncoming fear of this new administration.
Good God. Say it with me. You can't solve a problem that you refuse to properly identify. One of the only problems we have here with domestic violent extremism is far left radicals. Antifa, anti-police, those are the ones, I don't know, take it guys, this. Burning the buildings, burning the cars, taking over 6 square blocks of the city, looting, firebombing the police precincts, assaulting police officers, assaulting members of the media. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I can think of one example, of right-wing extremism, criminal civil unrest. And that's when I think it was certainly during the pandemic, but when those people scaled the fence at Governor Inslee's mansion. And we talked about a scary incident, 100%. And then that was in the news forever. And it's like, yeah, but the, people firebombing stuff and lighting cars, well, that was in the interest of social justice. So that's totally okay. No one on that task force, as you well heard there, is interested in talking about that. And even bringing it up. It wasn't brought up once at the first task force meeting, which tells you it's a complete farce. The law enforcement members who are a member of that task force know it's a farce, and they should resign from the task force. All that task force is about is vilifying conservatives. Trump bad, cops bad, conservatives bad, and dangerous. And I am scared about what's going to come out of it. I mean, I already said, put me on your list, because I'm going to end up on the list anyway, because all the stuff they're talking about there, it's going to land all of us on their list. And I don't know what Bob Ferguson's going to do with the list, but he's going to use his hate crime hotline to bolster hate crime numbers to justify the continuation of his domestic violent extremism task force, which is just about vilifying conservatives. So again, their next meeting is tomorrow, 9 a.m., 800 Fifth Avenue, Suite 2000, if you'd like to attend. And you can check out the Domestic Violent Extremism and Mass Violence Task Force website for more information on how to attend virtually. So just absolutely insane stuff. Hopefully, if the meetings are packed enough with people who give testimony about how ridiculous it is, maybe they'll just fold the task force. I mean, be respectful, right? Don't go in there and prove them right by acting foolish, but they need to know that we see this task force for what it is. All right, I've encouraged you guys to take the First Mark Challenge, firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. We get endless positive stories from folks who took the First Mark Challenge and saved a ton of money. Brandi, I listen to First Mark commercials every day. Well, last week I reached out to them. Our annual premiums are going down more than $4,000. I can't believe I waited so long. Spencer says, well, I finally took the First Mark Challenge. Chase helped me, and they were able to save me $1,600 a year and consolidate the boat, cars, and motorcycle to one insurer. That sounds like a guy with a lot of toys. Good for you, Spencer. I bet you work hard and deserve them. Previously, I had each insured with separate companies. I told them how I was a diehard Dory listener. Now I'm glued to yours and Brandi's show. I love that so much. And that from Spencer. So we love it. Firstmarkinsurance.com, firstmarkinsurance.com. The very best part is they work for you, not the insurance companies. So they always have your best interest in mind. And did I mention, you never pay them anything. It doesn't cost you anything. So take the First Mark Challenge today. All right. I avoided talking about this on the show yesterday. With the California fires, like when we had the show yesterday, still very much out of control, the devastation there. I wanted to be kind of tactful. And so we didn't dive into some of the underlying narratives that people were bringing up right away, like the Los Angeles fire chief. And her commitment to DEI above all else. But now that we're a day removed, I want to talk about that a little bit in our segment, Unbelievable. And look, I know there's still a lot going on in California, but there's more to this story about, it's Kristen Crowley, who's the fire chief, and she's the first female fire chief, and she's also a lesbian. Like, I genuinely don't care. Don't care who you sleep with. I don't care what you got going on under your shirt or in your pants. Can you do the job? Are you competent? Obviously, you guys know I'm not in favor of DEI hires. I don't know if this is a DEI hire. If she is qualified for the job, great. But it's the fact that whenever there is a hire like that, they make it about that. They make it about the gender. They make it about the sexual orientation. It was like when Biden appointed Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court. She was very qualified. You might not like her ideology, but she was very qualified on paper for the Supreme Court. But he made it about the color of her skin, which to me just undercut her qualifications and made her look like a DEI hire. Now, the problem I have with the fire chief, Kristen Crowley, is they have had so many actual fundamentally concerning things going on in the fire department there, like a big slash in their budget. Yet she's out there talking about DEI. She's out there celebrating DEI and gay pride and saying it's her number one priority to make the fire department more diverse. And I can't help but wonder if there was less of a focus on that, less money being spent on that, would you have had more time to focus on, more money to focus on, making sure you were better prepared for what you knew was an eventuality, this catastrophic wildfire ripping through the city. So 1 month ago, this is December 4th of 2024, Kristen Crowley, the fire chief, sent a letter to, it went to elected leaders, but like the mayor of LA and others who are the board of commissioners for the fire department, et cetera. And it spelled out this massive budget cut that they were getting to the department and why she is opposed to it. And I think this letter is great. I mean, she's standing up for her fire department and laying out, it looks like she had a crystal ball. I just want to read it for you. So the Los Angeles City Fire Department is facing unprecedented operational challenges due to the elimination of critical civilian positions and a $7 million reduction in overtime staffing hours. These budgetary reductions have adversely affected the department's ability to maintain core operations such as technology and communications infrastructure, payroll processing, training, fire prevention, and community education. In addition to these impacts, the reduction in overtime hours has severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires, earthquakes, hazardous material incidents, and large public events. Specialized programs and resources such as air operations, tactical EMS units, disaster response, and community emergency response teams, which rely heavily on overtime hours, are now at risk of reduced effectiveness. And then she says this report provides an in-depth analysis of these cascading impacts, underscoring the critical need for resource restoration to ensure operational readiness, firefighter safety, and the delivery of high-quality public service. So just 1 month ago, the fire chief in LA, who's now under scrutiny for focusing on DEI efforts, was sending the board, the fire commissioners, a letter basically saying this money that the city and Mayor Karen Bass has cut from our budget hurts our ability to respond to mass casualties, to train our firefighters for wildfire prevention and fighting wildfires. I mean, it's literally like crystal ball stuff. And now you see the situation that we're in right now. I'll revisit that letter in a moment. But Mayor Karen Bass, as you know, she was out of the country. She was in Ghana. And she's trying to get a flight back. And this Sky News reporter confronts her on the jetway, on the jet bridge. And here's what she said.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
Can you back up, please? Appreciate it.
Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them?
Wow. Nothing to say. She had nothing to say. Now, his questions got a little hostile, but at the beginning, do you have anything to say to the residents as their homes burn? Do you regret cutting money from the fire department? They're trapped in a jetway together, and she doesn't have anything to say. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. And so clearly, on the cut of funding, it reminds me of the defund the police movement, where everybody's like, oh yeah, take money away from them. And now they're all, oh my gosh, why? We don't have enough officers to staff the city. We're spending too much money on overtime, et cetera. It's like they do these things without thinking of the consequences. But back to that fire chief for a moment. This is from the Daily Wire. Los Angeles fire chief says DEI is a top priority. So I have a hard time squaring if in that letter to the board of directors, complaining about the millions of dollars that were cut from their budget that would literally stop them from being able to respond to a wildfire situation like the one happening right now. If she had said, look, cut the DEI. DEI has been my top priority, but let's cut our DEI recruitment efforts. Let's take money from elsewhere. Let's take money from the DEI program that I'm spearheading here. So she has responsibility in this as well. When you're prioritizing, you can look at it in Washington State or elsewhere, when you're prioritizing DEI programs, DEI hiring, all that costs money. DEI programs aren't for free. It's not like you just put out a memo saying, come here, people of color and gender diverse people. No, you're out there actively recruiting these individuals and you're spending money on that at the expense of spending money and time and energy and focus on preparing for wildfires, on preventing wildfires, on making sure you have the necessary equipment and personnel. Their priorities are very clear. And so she's not, just because she wrote that letter a month ago, complaining about the lack of money, does not mean she's in the clear here. Here is Chief Kristen Crowley talking to ABC 7 about the importance of her costly DEI program.
Every day, the LAFD is called upon to respond to crises, and today it is taking a step to resolve one of its own. The department's first ever Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau will launch in January, 1 year since its first ever female fire chief, Kristen Crowley, was appointed.
So by creating this new bureau, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau, now we actually have the staff to do the work when it comes to doing a deep dive in regard to how we do business, how we take care of one another in the fire stations and in our work environment.
And then she, honest to God, turns around and complains that they don't have the money for enough fire personnel, that they don't have enough money for training, fire prevention, tactical EMS units, air operations, disaster response teams. Square that. Nicole, can you play that again? Can you play that clip again?
Every day, the LAFD is called upon to respond to crises, and today it is taking a step to resolve one of its own. The department's first ever Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau will launch in January, 1 year since its first ever female fire chief, Kristen Crowley, was appointed.
So by creating this new bureau, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau, now we actually have the staff to do the work when it comes to doing a deep dive in regard to how we do business, how we take care of one another in the fire stations and in our work environment.
Oh my God. And then she turns around and has the audacity to complain that they won't have the money to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires. And look where we are now. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to criticize her for her DEI initiatives. And it's just another example of the priorities of the far left. They literally will prioritize their extreme ideologies and identitarianism over people's lives. And if that's not proof, I don't know what it is. All right, coming up next, we'll get to some national news and our segment Florida Report. First, if you're thinking about selling your home in 2025, reach out to our friend Wes Jones at sellwithwes.com. Wes has been doing this in this market for a really long time. He's been through all the real estate ups and downs, and so he's a great person to rely on just for advice on, hey, you know, the real estate market's slow. What does that mean for my home? Because homes are still going for great prices. You might need to make, you know, a few repairs or cosmetic upgrades. The good news is, though, Wes can help you with that. That's what they specialize in. In fact, they have something called the Listing Boost Concierge Service, where they can come in and, as it says, give you a concierge service to make sure that you get any cosmetic repairs done. They can even help you pay for it up front and manage those projects. So it's really cool. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, the local media in California is doing a great job of covering the fires. I have been watching a lot of the local media. Man, their reporters are out there in really dangerous areas doing really difficult work. And then you have the freaking national news that comes in and just does a crap job. This was one of my big frustrations. When we had, when I was in local news here and we had emergencies or whatever it is, then you'd have the network send their people in and they'd want like the red carpet rolled out for them. I remember this at OSO. They didn't want to go out and do any of the actual hard work. And then they just come in there. They didn't care if they offended people or whatever it is. They were just trying to get their story and leave. Just annoying. So Anderson Cooper, who I tend to not hate, I mean, he's gone off the deep end a little bit in the last 7 years, but he was doing an interview with Governor Gavin Newsom. So I have two Anderson Cooper clips I'm going to play. This one isn't the one that bothers me with Anderson. It bothers me with Governor Newsom. So Governor Newsom, of course, is standing there. They're in this really, scene, devastation and destruction. And Anderson asks what I think is an important question. Hey, why are the fire hydrants out of water? And here's what he said.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in Palisades, ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter in this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system. I mean, those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe 1 fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's got to be determined by the local
folks are going to figure that out. You're the governor. You're there. What are you there for then? Literally, what are you there for then? Local folks are going to figure that out. This is the guy who wants to be president one day. What do you say when there's a national emergency? Hurricane sweeps through Florida. Earthquake in Washington. No, the local folks are going to figure that out. This guy has zero leadership capacity. Quite literally zero. And I wish Anderson Cooper had come back and said, what do you mean the local folks are going to figure that out? You're not going to help them? You're not going to do anything for them? So anyway, Anderson also asked him, although very begrudgingly so, about comments Donald Trump made. So President-elect Donald Trump took to social media and said, one of the best and most beautiful parts of the United States of America is burning down to the ground. It's ashes, and Gavin Newsom should resign. This is all his fault. So Anderson Cooper begrudgingly asks Governor Newsom about Trump's comments.
I hate to even ask this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it. I mean, it's people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
Anderson Cooper there. I hate to even ask. It is a legitimate question, and you don't have to couch it as an attack from Donald Trump to press the governor of the state about this disaster and to say, just ask him simply, are the criticisms valid? Ask him to defend the criticisms. Ask him to defend the lack of water. Ask him to defend the lack of preparation. Ask him to defend the lack of proper maintenance in forest lands and bushes and all that stuff. But he's not going to do that. Oh, I hate to even ask you, Donald Trump attacked you. What do you have to say to that? And then Gavin Newsom wants to act like he would never politicize anything. Do you remember the wildfire that happened in California when Donald Trump came to California and stood there in the bushes with Gavin Newsom? And Donald Trump said at the time, hey, we need to get in here. We need to rake all of this up, and we need to make sure that we have better forest management and brushland. Is it brushland? Is it brushland management? You get what I'm saying. And Gavin Newsom basically said at the time, now's not the time to discuss that. Well, apparently the last 7 years weren't the time to discuss that either. So Gavin Newsom is perfectly fine making things political, and it only hates it when somebody makes it political and it's about him. And Anderson Cooper there, to not hold Gavin Newsom's feet to the fire. He used to be a really terrific journalist and lets him get away with saying like, oh, the locals are going to figure it out. And then, by the way, I'll just play this clip. It's kind of hard to hear. He's bragging about being there with Joe Biden. Joe Biden stood next to him, gave his, regular platitudes, didn't take any questions from the media, and thought fit, because his mind is so far gone, to say this.
The good news is I'm a great-grandfather as of today. Baby girl, baby boy.
Says the good news is I'm a great-grandfather. It was the weirdest, most awkward thing. We would play you longer into the clip, but you can barely hear it. He's talking about, people, are going to come back home and not know if their home's there. But the good news is, like a transition, just like that. The good news is I'm a great-grandfather. And all the sycophants in the room are like, yay! Not, what a weird thing to say. I would 10 times out of 10 rather have a president who makes it political and saying, here's what happened, here's who's at fault, we need to hold them accountable. Other than a president who gives, platitudes. The people of California are strong and resilient and we shall rebuild. The platitudes don't do anything for them. And they certainly don't care in this moment that you're a great grandfather while people are losing their loved ones because of the guy standing next to you. Insane stuff. All right. So let's see. We covered California. Let's go all the way over to the Sunshine State. It is our weekly segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, wow, we missed you.
I know. I feel like it has been a long time. And then I was like, actually, it has been a long time. So that feeling is correct.
Yeah, I haven't seen you since last year. It was forever ago. Let's talk about Matt Gaetz. So I thought we were rid of Matt Gaetz. I shouldn't say I don't like him. I don't know him. Just something about him is just very bro-ish to me. He may be mulling a run for Florida governor.
Yeah, and I think it's a little early for anybody to say for sure if they're going to jump into that race, but it is coming up. So I'm sure this year is going to be full of people talking about joining it. But I really wasn't, after everything that went down with him last month, I really wasn't expecting him to say anything this soon about possibly running for governor.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me, and it's not too terribly soon. I mean, the election's 2026, so probably in a few months you'll have all the people entering the race, and DeSantis is term limited out. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know the general attitude toward Matt Gaetz in Florida.
I think a lot of people that, like in my personal circle, a lot of people didn't really put a lot of attention into the accusations that he faced last month because there wasn't any like real trial and decision on that matter, I guess. So it's all just speculation and to a certain degree, and enough speculation that had him pull out from, joining Trump in Washington. But I think that he would probably still have a pretty decent chance of like gaining some support down here. Maybe just because he's the only one that's really on the Republican side that has really said anything about maybe running, but I don't know. I guess it stands to be, we'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, if Trump gets behind him, then that would certainly help. The thing about Matt Gaetz is I feel like he's a showman, right? He wants attention and, he has these grand gestures designed for attention. Like Ron DeSantis was good at that when it needed to happen, but he was like he is a down to business governor. Like he knows how to handle his business. He knows a lot about the issues. I'm not sure that Matt Gaetz, he certainly isn't as prepared to govern as Ron DeSantis, I think, was. So I don't even know that he'd be a good governor. But all right, there is a transgender TikToker who is in a little hot water in Florida, although I don't blame, is it him or her? I don't blame them. So in Florida, you cannot change the gender on your driver's license, right? Like you couldn't go today and say, I want to be a man. Correct? Okay, here you can. And so apparently this transgender TikToker found a loophole and shared it on social media?
Yes, they figured out that if you are replacing your current driver's license, not renewing it, but replacing it, you can use prior, like other forms of identification to back up the information that goes on your replacement. So you can use a passport, and on your passport, you can choose your identity. So they use their passport to update their lost or replacement driver's license and change their gender with that. So that's apparently the loophole. They put a video that's been recently taken down. Whether they took it down or TikTok did, who knows? But the Florida Department of Motor Vehicles has become aware of this and canceled this person's driver's license.
But at the same time, they didn't do anything illegal. They just, I don't think you can't, I guess it has to be your birth. So they lied, right? And said, this was my birth gender. So that's a lie. So maybe that's why they canceled it. But they're just pointing out a loophole. Now they know, and they'll try to find a way to close the loophole, but I don't blame them.
Yeah. And the Department of Motor Vehicles is also saying that this could open an investigation into providing false information, which opens up a whole different type of legal issue for this person. So I think that hopefully this just becomes a learning curve on the DMV's part, where they have to, if this is something they're going to stick to and you have to go by your gender at birth, then they're going to have to find a way to change and close this loophole up so other people don't take advantage of it.
Yeah, because I haven't seen the document that he had to fill out, because I think he now like says he's she.
Yeah.
And so if it said, what is your gender at birth, and you've signed it and said, what I am attesting to is legal, then yeah, then you violated the law. So just interesting. Yeah, he was all bragging about it on, you guys can do this. Ron DeSantis is probably crying right if he knew about this right now. And then he did know about it, and then he lost your driver's license. So, all right, one quick thing. I love talking about this every year when you're going to have a cold streak, because my husband, loves the iguanas down there. And they just get frozen up in the trees and fall from the sky. And you saw this.
I did. I saw my first falling iguana. I have seen them, comatose in the shade where you just kind of pull them into the sun. I see that often enough when it gets cooler down here. But this past week and going into this weekend, it is going to be fairly chilly here in Florida. And these iguanas, they can't handle it. And I saw one fall out of a fairly large tree. And it scared the bejesus out of me because it was probably like 3 feet long. And it hit the ground hard. I was like, oh my gosh. I went over and it was okay, but I had to kind of just pull it a little bit out of the shade into the sun. And I just left it there. But yeah, my first falling iguana.
Oh my gosh. And you've lived in Miami for 20 years.
Yeah, I've been here a while. I've seen iguanas fight in the trees and then fall out from fighting, but I've never seen one get so cold that it froze up and just kind of tipped out of its branch.
I love though that Floridians, this is just an accepted thing, drag them into the sun. I love that they all it's like a normal thing. Oh, we got to help the iguana and drag it into the sun. I just think that's a very nice thing. It's a very nice gesture.
It is. It's literally part of our weather reports this time of the year.
Falling iguanas. Please help them today. All right, Miranda, we appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Iguanas creep me out. I'm not touching an iguana. I'm not touching an iguana for anything. If that iguana freezes and dies, I'm not touching it. Gross.
Why is that gross? They have skin it's not
scaly.
It's not even
I don't want to touch anything
transfer of anything.
Would you pull a snake out from and put it in the sun?
I mean, if I absolutely 100% knew it wouldn't bite me or wasn't poisonous.
Just thinking about it. I know, I'm not touching anything like that. I'll find somebody else to pull the iguana into the sun. All right, I want to get to our daily subscriber show poll. I kind of knew the results would be a little skewed here, but sometimes I need to check and make sure I'm not going crazy, that something is just absolutely unnecessary, totally controversial. I mean, like the kids in sports, I'm like, I think that if everyone honestly had a secret ballot that they could be polled, right? And they were asked, do you think boys should be able to compete against girls? They would say no. It would be like a 99% issue.
I don't even think it'd have to be that secret.
But if it's a public, yeah, I mean, I think it would still be on the side of sanity if it were public. But if all your results were posted Joe Schmo down the block said this, I think the results would be a little less. But I asked you guys, do you believe fire and police agencies should engage in recruitment efforts specific to gender, race, and sexual orientation? Do you think there's any sort of merit in that? Yes or no? Overwhelming number on Patreon, Locals, and X saying no, 98%. Brenda says DEI should not be the deciding criteria, but if a person who's of a race or sexual minority can qualify in all the necessary areas, physical strength, emotional stability, intelligence, then they should definitely be considered for hire. Yeah, I mean, 100% obviously. If you can do the job, great. But we shouldn't be giving these bonus points to people based on immutable characteristics that they didn't work for, and that don't make them any more qualified for the job. There's an argument in policing that, hey, you need to have a police force. If there's areas where there's a lack of trust, you need to have a police force that reflects the community that it serves. So I can kind of see that, if you have officers of color that are patrolling, communities of color, if there's a trust issue, that maybe that could be helpful. But you can't be in a position where you elevate one recruit over another simply because of the tone of their skin. That's insane stuff. Rick, he voted yes to this question, says seeking out qualified candidates from underrepresented groups is not, I emphasize not, DEI as promoted in the academic and corporate world. Well, I don't see that, because I think that if they're qualified 100%, but is that fair, I would ask you? Is it fair to, if you have two people, they're the same educational background, the same physical abilities, and one is white and one is black, and every time the white person loses because how do you decide that situation? Is it okay to break a so-called tie based on skin color or gender or an underrepresented group? Paul says, give me the most qualified person for the job. Michelle says, I voted no, but my hesitation was only on the gender portion. Just like with athletics, men and women are built differently, so I agree on different standards there, but everything else is a no. If you make the qualifications set, you are in. Otherwise, no, you need to meet their bar like everyone else. Well, this is interesting then, because when you go to the police academy or you go through the testing to become a police officer, they have different physical standards for men and women. Do you think that's okay? Should the physical standards be the same? And it would probably preclude a lot of the women from being able to be police officers at all, because their standards are different right now. I'll tell you though, if my house was on fire, I want a dude who can lift my body weight coming to my door. Like, I don't need some, like, 5'3"
if it's a chick that can lift you, I guess.
100%.
But they should have the same. Yes.
Right. They should have the same skill. So that's kind of an interesting thing I've never even talked about. Should the standards, the physical standards, be the same? Because that really would disqualify a lot of women from working as firefighters, as police officers, who might be very well qualified. Like, for instance, you need women police officers. If you have victims of sexual assault who might be more comfortable speaking to a female detective. I mean, there are some valid reasons for that. But it's like, where does it go from DEI? Where is it acceptable and where is it just racism, essentially? Jennifer, we should recruit everyone, not just specific people. The messaging could include all genders and races wanted. And you make a good point there, because one of the other arguments is, like, we ran into this in Seattle. They're so focused on DEI in the police department. We're down 600 plus officers. DEI shouldn't even factor into the equation. I don't care what the color of your skin is. Can you do the job? Because we desperately need you here. So that bothered me too. They do that in Seattle with the downtown businesses that were all closed and shuttered. They're like, well, Bruce Harrells, we're going to make those businesses available. We're going to help businesses get into those spaces to reinvigorate downtown. And we're going to prioritize Black businesses. It's like, no, dude, prioritize any business who's willing to open up shop on 3rd Avenue. You know, it makes absolutely no sense. So interesting debate indeed. All right. Let's see here. Let's go straight into comments and we'll talk to Zach and then we'll get into our closing Kennedy check. All right. Baron of Gray Matter, $5 super chat. Ask about why they want a 30-cent delivery tax on anything delivered to your home. Is he going to vote for that? What say you, John? Oh, I hadn't heard about that. They want a 30-cent delivery tax on everything delivered to your home at the state level? I'll have to look into that. Or Baron of Gray Matter, if you want to drop the bill number. Sometimes I miss bills, guys. I'm not all seeing. Robert Parker, $5 super chat. On TVW, Fergie just announced a proposed 6% state budget cut across the board, K through 12 and public safety exempt. So that's interesting because they don't want to do a 6% budget cut. They want to do, what was Inslee's budget, like an 11% increase? So maybe Bob Ferguson is being serious about wanting to actually cut the budget. I imagine that was at the legislative preview, perhaps. So yeah, we'll have to look into that. Matt Gilbert, $5 super chat. Matt, why do you make me read comments like this? Oh, he said, just ignore that super chat. Keep up the good work. Thank you. I'm not reading that comment. And then he gave me permission to not read the comment, which I think is funny. Baron of Gray Matter, $2. So FEMA's $700 going to cover it, right? Yes, FEMA going to come in and give everyone in California $700. Michelle Seberg, I disagree with Braun wholeheartedly. Trying to reverse psychology on Bob Ferguson won't work. Hey, maybe Bob Ferguson's going to surprise us. Maybe by the end of his term, he and I will be best friends.
Oh.
No?
I'm doubting that, but
Best
you
friends,
know, civil. We're all civil. He just has to give you a chance to be friends.
I don't know if I want to be friends with him.
Oh,
Until
I know
he
you don't
admits,
want to.
I could never be friends with him unless he admitted he just told absolute lies on the campaign trail. That's the only time I could be friends with him. All right, well, not friends. Let's be honest. I'm not gonna be friends with him. Rick Johnson, DEI undermines and diminishes people who are otherwise qualified and capable by emphasizing and prioritizing gender, ethnicity, and sexuality. Yeah, and 100%. That's what we're saying earlier with Ketanji Brown Jackson, is you undermined her qualifications by saying out of the gate, I'm going to choose a Black woman to the Supreme Court. So then you like narrowed the pool where she might have stood out in a pool that hadn't been narrowed by sex and skin color. Let me see. Deanne Sanderson, don't forget about all the firefighters who were fired for not getting the jab. Yeah, 100%. So you're short-staffed? Oh, but you haven't given a mea culpa for the firefighters and the police officers who you let go because they wouldn't get your vaccine that turned out to not even do what you said it was going to do when you fired them? yeah, I don't take any of you seriously.
I wonder if now, because I know, I mean, there's a lot of people's houses that burnt down. I'm sure some of them are politicians. And I wonder if some of this stuff will actually get talked about now. Maybe it'll be looked at differently, because that's what we said. This stuff has to affect people in power, and it is. Yep. In a big way.
Well, hopefully. You can only hope that people will wake up. But we're like, the damage is done on the whole jabs thing. What are you going to do to make people's lives right? You know, I mean, you could give them their jobs back. Like, are you going to give them all the back pay, all the hurt and stress that they went through in their families, and some of them relocating? And it's just absolutely disgusting.
I guess I just mean like issues of staffing and issues of clearing the brush, whatever. Things like this will actually get talked about, not just because it happened to a bunch of celebrities, but because it's happened to everyone.
Well, and the thing is, they don't want to credit Trump. Because Trump said this years ago, right? And this now, if they come around, oh my God, then we'll have to admit Trump was right. What they'll do is find a way to gaslight the media into acting like this was their idea, and they're all over it, and hope the media doesn't hold them accountable. Right. All right, let's do 2 more. Delisa Lynn, not to mention Biden said that his son Hunter has his house here, so he cares about that. Yeah, his rental property is there. Apparently it might have burned. I'm not sure. Egamorph, was interesting to see Obama sitting next to and laughing with Hitler. Goes to show you they never believed he was a threat to democracy, and they were just blowing smoke. Yeah, they were at Carter's funeral, and Obama and Trump just laughing. You wouldn't do that if you actually thought someone was like Hitler reincarnate threat to democracy. They just do it to win elections. They just do it to divide the nation and to fearmonger, and it's really quite disgusting.
I think it's funny too, because last time I forget where it was, but he was sitting next to Michelle, and same thing happened. Yeah. So I wonder if Obama was like, well, I'm not sitting Michelle next to him this time, so I'll sit next to him again. And same thing happens. Yeah. Like, maybe he's just a funny guy.
Well, you would refuse to attend though. If you actually thought someone was Hitler, like as bad as Hitler, would you sit next to them and talk to them? No. Would you laugh with them? No, because you'd be mortified to be seen doing that. Right. But they don't actually believe that. They don't actually care. This isn't them just being bigger people now. It was all a show all along.
Now, I do think that Kamala does not like him, because she was giving him some nasty glares.
Yeah. But 100%. All right. So we talked on the show this week about how Justin Trudeau is out as Prime Minister of Canada. He'll be replaced by a Liberal leader, but then the next election, Pierre Poilievre will probably get that job, hopefully, and bring some sanity back to what's happening in Canada on a variety of fronts. So we want to ask Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital, if there is that significant of a change in the leadership in Canada, how does that, if at all, impact the economy of the United States? So Justin Trudeau, I mean, his economic policy is horrible. He's resigning. He'll be replaced, at least temporarily, with probably someone just like him until there's an election. I'm just curious, how much does Canada's economy and sort of big political shifts in Canada impact our economy?
You know, not so much when you just look at the size of each country. I mean, obviously the bigger influence economically is us on them. Having said that, I think indirectly it impacts us a lot. And the reason I say that is because, you know, they were very, you know, Trudeau is lockstep with the radical left in this country. You know, I would very much, and I don't even think he would object to this. You know, he's very much a globalist, right? And so in my personal opinion, I think all of mankind is better off, and the economies of the world are better off as these people filter out of the political process. So I don't think it necessarily has a big impact on us. And the reason I say that is kind of the same reason if you look at why Trudeau is stepping down. He's not going to say this, but it's really interesting to me that this announcement comes, is it 2 weeks after he went down to Mar-a-Lago and visited Trump?
Something like that, yeah.
Right? And yeah, I mean, hey, I'm not trying to, you know, be the conspiracy theorist that's reading in between the lines here, but I'm pretty sure Trump said, look, you got 2 options. I'm going to make your life a living hell, or you can go quietly, right? He's going quietly. And I think that sort of tells you all you need to know. I mean, no disrespect to our Canadian friends at all. It's just a scale issue, right? I mean, you've got one country that's got what is Canada 60 million people?
God,
something like that.
The wrong person.
Yeah, I'm
60 million people, 60 million moose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, and beautiful country, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, just the difference in scale. Do they swing the needle one way or the other for us? Maybe on the marginal basis, but not enough to be notable.
Yeah, Nicole Googled it. What's the
40 million.
40 million. Yeah, you were counting the moose into the original number.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that people plus
Australia.
moose there.
Yeah, and the bear.
Yes.
That being said, though, we look at, so things aren't going to change dramatically in Canada in the meantime. I'm half Canadian, by the way. My dad was Canadian, which I think gives me dual citizenship. I'm not sure if I need to explore that more, but I don't want to mix my loyalties. I'm American through and through. My husband tries to get me to apply for dual citizenship because he wants cheaper hunting opportunities in Canada, but that's not.
I was just going to say there had to be a hunting angle in there
hunting,
somewhere.
100%. Always a hunting angle with my husband.
Yes.
But, we've got
like
this
it, Marty.
Pierre Poilievre, who's sort of waiting in the wings on the Conservative Party. He is very, he kind of reminds me of the president of Argentina in terms of he wants a full, absolute gutting. He had this great line about how right now Canada measures the success of its programs by how much money those programs cost, not by the actual effect of those programs. So if you have someone like Pierre who takes over as the prime minister in Canada, you've got Donald Trump hopefully firing on all cylinders here. Couldn't there be some sort of North American resurgence, so to speak?
Yeah, so we actually just did I did an interview on another podcast recently, and one of the things that we discussed at great length was, look, and I want everybody, not let anybody put that much stake in it anyway, but this is not a prediction. This is more of an opportunity that I am seeing right now for the first time in my adult life. And in a lot of ways, it is the mirror image or the exact opposite of a similar movement that we saw in the 60s and 70s with the proliferation of communism around the world, right? If you think back to the 60s and 70s, and then especially even in the 80s, one of the fears in South America was what we call the domino theory, right? That communism would spread one country to another. And funny enough, history books won't tell you this, but that's sort of what happened, right? You kind of had a socialist, every country down in South America had its own flavor, but you have this spread. Okay, well, now you are suffering the impacts of that. Okay, so you go down and look at a country like Brazil. It is shocking that our deficit is 7% of GDP. Theirs is 10. Okay, and keep in mind, they do not have the world's reserve currency. Okay, so big difference. And they don't have anywhere near the size GDP and all that other kind of stuff. But long story short, there is an incredible opportunity here when you see a guy like what is it, Poilievre?
I don't know how to say his last name. I think it's Poilievre.
Poilievre. Okay. Well, how about we just call him the smart guy?
Let's call him just Pierre. Pierre.
Yeah, Pierre. There we go. So you hear a guy like Pierre, and here's the opportunity. Everybody is sucking on the fumes of this last few decades push of socialism and DEI and all that kind of stuff, right? And there's an incredible thirst for common sense, and it's not just philosophical. It's reality based, right? You look at places like El Salvador, Argentina, Brazil, Honduras, Ecuador. These systems have broken down. Right, you've reached the end point of where liberalism and socialism gets you, which eventually you run out of other people's money, and all of those countries are in the same place. Well, you're starting to see these quote unquote populist, free capitalist guys. We've seen it in Ecuador. We've seen it in Argentina with shockingly good results up until this point. You're hearing rumors about it potentially happening in Brazil. And in my opinion, it's only a matter of time in Brazil because there's no way out for Brazil unless they adopt policies like Argentina has. So yes, there is an incredible opportunity right now because this radical form of liberalism, which is really more like the merger of the Republican and Democratic parties, right? This unholy union of bureaucrats, both corporate and government bonded together, right? That has failed the world. And you're having all of these cultures and countries running up against this brick wall at the same time.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't do much for our economy, if Canada is successful, I want everyone else to be successful too. And for other countries like in Central America, their success is directly tied to us in the sense that you have people who are fleeing, for better economic opportunities or whatever it was. Well, if things are going fine in their country, they don't have to come here and they don't have to suck on our social safety net and all of those things. So I definitely will celebrate Canada getting back to some semblance of sanity, even if there's not a lot they can do for us, so to speak. So good insight there from Zach. If you would like to get a review of your retirement portfolio, always a good idea to get a second opinion. Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital can do that for you. They specialize in risk management because you only get one retirement. You want to make sure that it's properly protected. Your dream of retirement is intact when you get there. You can schedule your free Know Your Risk portfolio review. They'll cover the impacts of the election, an outlook for 2025, and a full reveal of how Bulwark is always looking for opportunities to lower risk, lower cost, give your retirement as much upside as possible. So you only get one retirement. Get a second opinion. Schedule your free portfolio review at knowyourriskradio.com. That's knowyourriskradio.com. And with that, can I get to our closing sanity check? Let's get to our closing sanity check. Oh, a lot of crises in Seattle, a lot going on. Crises, I mean, people are homeless. Crime is bad, so bad that the SWAT team is patrolling the streets of downtown Seattle. So let's check in on what the fine citizens of Seattle are focused on.
Homeowners here tell me they would like to see more housing in this area, but not at the cost of trees. So when a tree service showed up today, they came here in force. The police were called, but they were not found to be trespassing. The neighbors stayed put underneath this tree, so the cutting service left without taking it down.
This has been identified as an environmental justice priority area because of the rate at which we're losing trees.
A group called Tree Action counted more than 1,000 trees removed last year in Seattle.
Those were the legal removals. That doesn't even take into account the illegal removals that are happening as well.
April Cowgill is among those emailing and calling the developer, proposing an alternative to cutting these trees.
So they could just turn this, they have the space for it, and the tree could stay.
The architect they consulted suggests rotating one of the 3 units to be built 90 degrees to save the large evergreen.
We do want housing for the community as well. We just would like the trees and the housing to coexist.
Moore says the council has the power now to make changes while working on the city's comprehensive plan for the next 20 years. But these neighbors need action now.
They need action now. Imagine if Seattleites demanded action now on homelessness, on substance abuse, or on crime. And we really think Washington State, under this new progressive Commissioner of Public Lands, is going to be excited about thinning forests when you've got tree huggers in Seattle who are halting operations at a job site over a single tree, and they've got a council member who shows up and takes them that seriously. Good God. All right, before I let you go on the show today, I've got to tell you about Natchez RV Resort and their new phase of their grand opening. This one's really excited. If you've been thinking about hearing our spots on Natchez, it's just such a beautiful resort, and it is top of the line. I mean, they've got everything there. They've got a dog park. They got tennis courts and pickleball courts. They have this beautiful 4,300 square foot clubhouse with showers inside, laundry, a gourmet kitchen, and they even just finished the saltwater pool and hot tub, so that's really exciting. But the new lots that they're having opening at their grand opening weekend, January 25th and 26th, these are the best lots on the property, in my opinion, because, so first of all, they're extra large. They've got 25 of them available, and they have amazing unobstructed views, so nothing is going to be developed behind them. So you'll just have this peace and serenity. It'll be so awesome. So short drive from Seattle, a world away. Schedule your showing for Natchez RV Resort's brand new phase grand opening, January 25th and 26th. 25 premium view lots from the low 70s. NatchezRVResort.com, NatchezRVResort.com. And I think I fit everything in to the show, right? Yes. That has been today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. We'll have a new episode of Sundays with Subscribers with Washington's newest member of Congress, just sworn in, Congressman Michael Baumgartner of the 5th. We're going to talk to him about the Lake and Riley Act, about the incoming Trump administration, and what some of his priorities are as the state's newest member of Congress. We'll have all of that on Sunday's show. And then Monday, new legislative session begins. Lord knows it's going to be a busy, busy, busy one. And I already heard some crazy stuff that Democrats have scheduled for the first day of session, including rent control in committee on Monday. If you haven't signed up to support our show already, you can do that at undividedpod.com. Undividedpod.com. It's just $5 a month. We sure would appreciate it. Subscribers will see you on Sunday. The rest of you will see you on Monday.